A good result, but a great performance from Newcastle United against Manchester City over the weekend. 1-1 was the final score. And to put it into context, last week against Fulham, Newcastle lost 3-1, and it was a dire result and performance. And actually, the performances this season is exactly what people have been worried about and frustrated with. So it was really good to see that Newcastle came out against Manchester City and played a much better style of football and got a really good result against, obviously, a very, very good team in Manchester City. Howe said earlier in the week in his press conference that he thought he realised he knew what was missing against Fulham. They'd obviously worked quite hard this week to correct things, work on things as a team. Having the Wimbledon match postponed, I think, has benefited us in the sense that we had longer to prepare for this game, and it seemed to have worked. Basically, what Howe did was implement the high intense pressing game back into our team, and it worked. Like, we really, really worried Manchester City. We had spells of the game where we were the better team. We started the game better than Manchester City, and although we didn't create loads and loads of clear-cut chances, we did create pressure in the Manchester City final third, which doesn't always show up on a stat sheet, but like, we were in dangerous areas getting balls into the box. We were missing Isak, we didn't have a recognised striker, and so therefore some of those pressures that we created weren't even turned into shots, let alone goals or anything like that. But the really important thing that happened yesterday was the midfield was brilliant. Bruno, Tonali, Joelinton as the midfield three worked really, really well together in this particular system and setup. We were very compact, we protected the defence and didn't leave a lot of room for Manchester City. When I say we were compact, what I mean is Harvey Barnes on the left and Murphy on the right, they were deliberately tucking inside. They weren't playing attached to the line. We narrowed the pitch basically, and the reason we were doing that is obviously to kind of get numbers into the central area in order to compete with Manchester City, who have unbelievably amazing technical players, to the point where it was a bit frustrating sometimes because Harvey Barnes kept checking in when sometimes it would have been better for him to have gone to the outside and run down the line, but it didn't happen on a couple of occasions. But I think it was clearly an instruction to tuck in, and you can't argue with it in terms of the overall general performance. Just a quick note, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button. That really helps spread this video to other people, and I would really appreciate it. We had some good chances, like I say, few chances, but plenty of opportunities that doesn't always show up in the stats. So I think we can be pleased with what we saw. Was it perfect? No, it wasn't perfect. But it was much more like what I want to see and what a lot of other supporters want to see, no doubt about it. The team played well as a whole, without a doubt, but there were some players who I felt really stood out. For me, Kieran Trippier was just outstanding yesterday. He's been written off, derided, kind of had people wanting him to leave the club, but yesterday he showed he is still able to put in very good performances at the very highest level of English football, and he led by example too. What I was really pleased with Trippier was his captaincy and leadership skills on the pitch. There were a few times when the players were kind of losing their heads a bit because of the refereeing and some of the very random decisions he was making. And Trippier was literally there, telling them to calm down, doing all this sort of thing, and that worked really well. He was literally leading the men, and when Trippier's not on the pitch, we actually lack that kind of leadership, I think. I think Trippier's pretty much the only player in the squad who delivers that in the way that he can. He had a very good game defensively as well, and he was subbed off eventually because he was absolutely worn out and shattered, and I'll come on to that a little bit later in the video. I thought Lewis Hall on the left-hand side was also fantastic. The whole defence was very good, actually. Scher and Byrne also did a great job in central defence. But I want to just mention Lewis Hall because I've been saying all season that I'm worried about the left-back position and that I'm not sure we found the solution to that position at the moment. And I still, this is one game. This is a very, very small sample size, isn't it? But Hall played very, very well. It was definitely his best performance for Newcastle so far. And although I've been worried about the left-back position, part of my criticism and concern for that area is the fact that it's not always the left-back's fault. It's not always been Hall's fault. It's not always been Lloyd Kelly's fault, depending on who's playing there, as the fact that they've been so exposed. That comes down to the midfield. Yesterday, we were able to sort of combat that in the way we played the game with the high-intense press and all that kind of stuff. We even had like Joelinton at left back at one point, kind of dropping in whilst Hall was elsewhere, and Joelinton dropped in to cover him. So it was really good to see that had been identified as an area of weakness in the team, and Howe had done something about it in terms of tactics to make sure that Hall was more covered, and as a result, Hall put in an absolutely excellent display. Hall clearly is a very, very good player. He's got a bright future. He's still very young. We need consistency from him, but judging by the fact he was playing against Manchester City at a very high level and played that well, bodes very well for the future for him and Newcastle. Also, Bruno in midfield was exceptional. Bruno is unbelievably at good, tight control and kind of, just getting himself out of very tight situations when 2 or 3 players around him, and he was doing that excellently yesterday for a large majority of the game. It was probably Bruno's best display that I've seen for a long time as well. And, sometimes I think the captaincy has weighed heavily on him so far this season, but yesterday he took the game by the scruff of the neck and led by example in midfield, and that was excellent. Speaking of midfield, Tonali, he started the game. He looked really, really good as well. His vision and passing is just exceptional, and he's also not afraid to get stuck in, and it's just very pleasing to see that we've got a really good midfielder in Tonali, and basically he has to start regularly from now on. There's just no doubt about that. And then there's Gordon, of course, ran himself into the ground, won the penalty, scored the penalty, had a really good game for us. He was much, much more like the Anthony Gordon that we're used to seeing from last season. He was in Manchester City's face from the very first second of the game. He was closing down the goalkeeper, who had Man City's goalkeeper had a bit of a dodgy game in terms of distribution, and that was partly down to Gordon's tenacity and kind of just non-stop running at him and the defence, and it was really good. Now, this leads me to the kind of the second part of this video in a sense. Gordon was shattered by the end of the game. He was shattered by an hour really, and he did finish the game. He played like 95 minutes, 97 minutes, wasn't it, in the end? And that's fine. Like, he did that, but he was absolutely worn out. He wasn't taken off. I think we could have taken Gordon off, at least 10, 15 minutes from the end, just to kind of protect him a little bit. And this is what I think the issue is. Can we keep playing the high press? It worked against Man City. We got a good result. It is effective. It does look good. And we know from experience it works with our players. Howe used that system, that method, in order to keep us safe in the Premier League and then subsequently qualify for the Champions League the season after. But it came at a cost. It's not sustainable. And it derailed our season last season, really, in terms of Europe and the Premier League. And we didn't finish... we didn't even get Europe in the end, even though it was by a fine margin. So it's something that needs to be considered, I think, going forward. We can't just expect that against Everton next week and Brighton the week after, that we can just keep doing this again, because ultimately we'll end up with players injured, missing games, and Howe just has to find some sort of balance between how we press, how intensely we press, and making sure we're still covering ourselves defensively. There's got to be a balance there, where there's got to be a happy medium where you're not killing players every single week and gaining injuries, but you can have a team that is more functional in midfield, who are then able to protect the defence. That is something we haven't done. We haven't protected the defence well enough for most of this year, this calendar year, I would say. And that's why we've conceded so many goals. Yes, we are a team who are always going to score goals. We've got the players to do that. But defensively, last season what let us down was losing 11 out of 18 away games, conceding lots of goals, and we can't have a repeat of that this season. Now, overall, very happy with this season. It's gone very well. In terms of results, we've got 11 points, more than we probably would ever have thought we could have had, and that's great. We've got a really good, strong base to build on at this point, and now is the time. If we can turn those poor performances into good performances and keep picking up points, who knows where we could end up this year. It is quite exciting, but also you just have to have a bit of trepidation about it, because this is Newcastle. Things aren't always straightforward. And I'm not saying that this one game is like a magic bullet that solved all our problems. Next week against Everton is going to be very, very different. It's not going to be easy at Everton. And we have to go there and we have to be the dominant team. That's what I want to see next week. I want to see us being the team in charge of that game against Everton next week. I think we can do it, but the team will have to work hard this week in order to do that. And I'm not sure we can play exactly the same way as we did against Man City this weekend. But I am very happy with the result. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe. And I'll see you really soon for another video.